Welcome to the Leadmore podcast. I'm your host, John T. Meyer. In episode 9, I sat down with Augustana University president Stephanie Herseth Sandlin. Stephanie has an incredible journey. She was South Dakota's first ever female House of Representative, and at that time at the House, she was the youngest representative there. She has served in executive roles in the private sector and now as a university president. And Stephanie shares throughout her whole life, the key was the relationships, people who supported her, people who nudged her, people who were always there for her no matter what happens in the ups and the downs. So you'll hear those stories and more in our conversation. It was such a great time. So sit down and listen to President Stephanie Herseth Sandlin. All right. Welcome to the Leadmore podcast. I'm so excited today. We have President Stephanie Herseth Sandlin from Augustana University with us. How are you today, Stephanie?
I'm well, John. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I know we're recording this late July. It will probably get released early August. You have a busy month ahead of you.
We do. We've had a busy summer, super busy spring, and we have an exciting and busy fall planned, as we always do on a college campus, but a lot of details that we've worked through. And so as we implement these protocols, there's excitement plus a healthy dose of some anxiety.
Absolutely.
Get underway with the new semester.
That's been an unexpected trend with this podcast, as every leader has been faced with some new challenges that they weren't prepared for. But we were just talking about before we hit record, you guys are having a plan, and at least for now, as you said, and you move forward with the best you can do.
That's right. We started our new strategic plan, our decade-long journey to 2030 in January, and didn't realize it so quickly into on the journey. We think we still have the right roadmap because we were informed in this plan with all the trends in higher education today. But this is certainly a rockier, steeper path than we were anticipating being on so early in the journey. But we're learning a lot along the way. We're keeping it on the road. We have to develop maybe a little bit more detail around in our map for this particular leg. We might have a detour or two, not to take the metaphor too far, but we're learning a lot from each other. And a lot of our plan related to digital fluency, different technological platforms for innovation, and how we maintain the same rigor and standard of quality curriculum and education, but innovation around how that's delivered. And our new Doctorate of Physical Therapy program is in this hybrid format. And so we're just putting a lot of things sort of on fast track by necessity, but that are still clearly part of what we had on this roadmap. So just as we may have certain detours that make the journey seem a little longer, we'll have some where it'll shorten our paths to some of our goals.
Interesting. And so I had that on my agenda. I wanted to talk about your plan. And so since you talked about it, let's get right after it. Because I think one of the hardest things for leaders or developing young, growing leaders is vision. And, some people can do, I can do a 1-year goal, but 5-year goals, you came out and said 2030, right? This is at the time, 12 years out? Now it's 10 years out.
Right.
How do you build a plan that is big enough, like big, hairy, audacious goals, but also still get a whole, you have faculty, staff, students, donors, alumni to still believe that it's realistic?
Yeah, that's a great question, John. And when I started hosting and facilitating vision ideation sessions in the spring of my first year as president, I used Jim Collins' BHAGs as an example of, let's just dream together. I know that we've had some, leaner budget years, but and we worked at this at Raven Industries where I was previously as well. You get a group of leaders, group of stakeholders together, and you ask them to do their best to look out further on the horizon. And importantly, it's not just sort of what do we think Augustana's potential is to do more in higher ed for students in the community, but what are those things that we may have to stop doing, right? Not that we give up on cherished traditions, but what are those things that maybe have outlived the usefulness in programming, whether it's in academics, student life, athletics, alumni, or that we need to retool, or that we need to just reconfigure. And again, a lot of what we're working through now in these virtual environments give us some ideas of how we maintain but cultivate new levels of engagement among alumni if we can't travel to them on a regular basis. And so I think for me, it was really building context. I think that leaders need to listen well and listen not just for what's being said, but what's not being said, and to ask a lot of questions of those who offer ideas and to find the threads of the ideas. And so to have facilitated, I think it was about 16 or 17 ideation sessions myself, 2-hour sessions with we tried to keep the groups under 20. And those were just visioning together. Mm-hmm. That led to developing what we thought were appropriate aspirational goals. And not that it was something where you just say, well, let's do a survey. That's not leadership. Surveys can inform and give you data, but you also have to articulate something that with your stakeholders, current faculty and administrators, coaches and staff, alumni, the board of trustees, that you're aspirational, that it's appropriately ambitious to unleash more potential, but not so kind of wild, right? Or wild-eyed that people won't find it credible or believable. And I think that we came to a good spot, not just in our visioning together, but then we also said, we laid out the aspirational goals after we tested those with different stakeholders, knowing that we had some that were a little bit more contentious than others.
Sure.
Then we spent nearly 10 months planning together, right? And I think by doing that internal organic homework and giving the work to the people closest to the work and gathering that data, doing the due diligence, analyzing it, we came to, I think, find that we had people who were believing even more that these were the right aspirational goals.
That's great.
Right. So I really do feel good about the process we undertook, both in the spring of 2018 and that fall with the Board of Trustees and our campus community, but then really a terrifically coordinated strategic planning process with my top leaders as chairs of steering committees and Dr. Pam Holman, who helped us coordinate that process and the parallel campaign development.
Yeah, it's definitely a seesaw. I mean, it seems like if it's too bold and audacious, people just won't believe it, like you said. But if it just seems, if everyone sees it and says, we'll do that, then that's not big enough, right? You have to be a little uncomfortable when you probably see these goals.
And you have to answer the why, right? Why a changed academic structure? Why those new academic programs? Why a transition to Division I? Why a revitalization of a physical campus, right? Why those types of scholarships? And I learned a lot of sort of the importance of explaining why when I was in public office, but also some work I was able to do while I served South Dakota in Congress with Simon Sinek, who many of your listeners may know.
Yeah, he's great.
Leadership and the importance of why.
So you must be the reason that he came to Raven a few years ago.
Yes,
I know you must have been the connection there.
I made the call, and
cool.
was able to host him. And as I assumed this role at Augustana, we reconnected again. I know he's still doing important work, and perhaps virtually we can host him at Augustana.
He's definitely a person that I look up to and follow, read all his books. So we'll come back to Augustana, but since we started there, so you mentioned you were the first female to serve in the House of Representatives for the state of South Dakota. You were the youngest representative at the time that you served. I want to go back even before then, though. You have politics in your family. Your grandfather was the governor of South Dakota. Your dad served out in Pierre. Did you ever? What was the first leadership position you ever had? Whether it be, was it like student council, or when was the first one you can think of?
I can think of. I was elected president of my class at Groton High School for my junior year.
Okay.
And then I was elected governor of Girls State, South Dakota Girls State. Later that year, between my junior and senior of high school, and that was a real honor. And I still come across, just this week, got an email from someone that we're working with, for campus preparations, and she said, "Stephanie, we crossed paths back in Girls State." And so, it's heartwarming when I think back on what a great experience that was. Continues to be for so many young young women and young men at Boys State, a terrific program.
I was a Boys State alum, you bet, up in Aberdeen.
Yeah, and the auxiliary sponsor. It's really, I wish more and more students could participate in it, just because I think at a time when citizenship and our form of government and our democratic institutions, and I think it was certainly a formative experience for me, as it was for my brother, the Boys State and Girls State experiences. And again, you just cross paths with people over the course of your personal and professional life that were there with you and kind of remember you back then.
You bet. So do you think growing up politics was just something you were exposed to, or was it something that your family values were encouraged to run for office and to stand up and volunteer, or where'd that come from?
That's a good question, John. So I think clearly growing up in the family that I did, while I did not know my grandfather Herseth, who had served as governor, he passed away a year and a half before I was born.
Okay.
My grandmother Lorna was really a significant role model for me, because just as my dad got involved in politics when I was about 5, he ran for the state legislature, my grandmother was already serving as Secretary of State.
Yeah, that's great.
I remember, and I'm sure helped refreshing my memory with pictures that I've seen of sitting on her lap in her office, both with Governor Knipe, who was governor at the time, but then also when Governor Janklow was serving, she served when he was in office too. And to spend time in the Capitol when both my dad and grandma were serving had planted seeds early about the importance of government and public service. And it was but I had an older brother. And so generationally, while things were changing in the 70s for women, it was really my brother who was probably cultivated a little bit more deliberately than I was for leadership and active participation. I mean, my mom and I were certainly part of campaigns, and my dad was, encouraging, when I told him I might run for governor of Girls State, right? Yeah. And so I'm not saying that I wasn't encouraged, but I do think that there were still some gender differences, even with a grandmother who was serving at the time. But that's more reflective of just the time, sort of how socialization was still changing. But I really do feel that both my parents encouraged me to take risks and to put myself out there and to appreciate the role of public service, given the family's tradition.
Sure, that's great. And so you're from small town South Dakota, but you decided to go to the big city and went to undergrad at Georgetown and also did your law degree there. Did your feelings about public service, about politics change when you started living in the hub in DC?
Well, certainly my interest in government inspired me to look at colleges and universities on the East Coast, our nation's capital. I only applied to 3 colleges. Now, my older brother, I don't like admitting this as president of Augustana, my older brother came to Augustana. Okay. And I was one of those little siblings, who maybe just wanted to do something different than what my brother did. Right?
I know that. Oh, yeah.
And my brother wasn't as interested in maybe becoming a lawyer as I was when I was in high school. My dad had wanted to go to law school, but had a sole surviving son deferment from Vietnam, and then took over the farm when my grandpa passed. And so there was always that seed planted early too about a law degree, going to law school. So I had applied to USD, and I applied to Georgetown, and I applied to George Mason University, which is outside of DC and wasn't as expensive. And my parents encouraged me to spread my wings a little bit, although we were taking some financial risk. They had saved, but not quite as much as it was going to cost to attend Georgetown. And so taking out some loans and what I was eligible for some scholarship. And when I went to Georgetown, it was a great experience, but it was intimidating. Yeah. I came from a smaller, more rural high school, and a lot of students there were legacy students, had gone to private preparatory schools, wasn't sure I could cut it academically, but proved that I could if I worked hard at it. I was a little, cautious about the public transportation, the buses and the metros. I didn't get real comfortable with that until second semester. But I also started to appreciate even more where I grew up, and being from South Dakota and having been raised on the farm. And yet my parents divorced in my sophomore year of college. And so while I went to Washington, D.C. and Georgetown because of my interest in government, my focus started to change my junior year. And I studied abroad for a summer. I minored in Spanish and became fluent in Spanish. I started looking at law school, but more really to be on a path to teach, to practice and teach law or government. And then I pursued a joint degree program during law school and really turned my back on politics because I contributed the toll of politics as one variable among others in my parents' decision to divorce. And so I kind of came around full circle to it based on those seeds that were planted early in my family and some of the folks who watered that seed after I had healed maybe from some of the wounds of my parents' divorce in my early 20s.
Yeah. So, but then you can start to see those seeds, I mean, now leading back to your role now, right? And that value of education. And I'm sure that when you think about students who come sometimes even across the world to attend Augustana University, you can empathize with that.
That's right.
To a degree. And so that's great. Okay. So then one thing that I guess we have to talk about. So then in 2002, you, in a special election, you run to become the first female representative from the state of South Dakota. And so obviously after, practicing as a lawyer, something again, that switch flipped and you decided maybe I do want to step forward. And one theme we've seen already on this podcast was that a decision you made, or did you have people in your life sort of nudging you, bumping you forward, I'm guessing?
I did have people nudging me. And the research bears out still that women need even more encouragement. And so what I often tell people is, look, here I grew up in a political family with a tradition of public service, had family who helped me with not just my undergraduate, but advanced degrees. And I still needed encouragement from other women to get to the point where I felt, yes, I think I can do this. And so it was really women of my mother's generation, John, who I think felt they knew that because I was still single, that the variables in my decision weren't maybe as complicated as they get when men and women start families, and the impact of those commitments and sacrifices of campaigns and public service on families. There are certainly more benefits in my mind and advantages and disadvantages, but it can still take a toll, even as I referenced in what I felt happened in my parents' marriage. But then they really, I remember thinking I'm too young. I've been spending time both in South Dakota and Washington, and they kind of kept reminding me about the state's political history for the U.S. House seat and how young Larry Pressler and Tom Daschle and Tim Johnson and John Thune all were. They were all in their 30s, right? And then that started giving me, and I just had a sense that this group of women were going to not just encourage me and get me to say yes to do it, they were going to support me every single step of the way, and they did. And it was really my mom. My dad was not real keen on me running that first time in 2002. But my mom, who surprisingly, again, not the part of the family that came from that tradition, but that generation of women, right, who just said, just do it. I think she's just sort of, she knows me, and I think she knew that this was sort of one of those things that I might regret if I didn't do it, and that I certainly was going to have a hard road to hoe to win, even the nomination, let alone the general election. But I think she knew that I would be energized, that it would be sort of this transformative, wonderful experience because of the people that I would meet, maybe from her own experience, having been on the campaign trail. I think she knew it would be rewarding, but she also believed in me and believed that I could win.
That is so great. Yeah. That's really the main goal of a parent, right? Is believe in your children that they can do and chase their dreams. So that's
and great. My dad came around.
So you served, 2.5 terms basically with like a special election, right? Is that
Yeah,
correct?
3.5. Yep,
3.5.
I
Okay.
came in the special election, so I served out late Governor Janklow's term,
Yep.
right, from the 2002 election. And then I won the general election in 2004. So I had 3 full terms.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
But my time in public office was bookended by the losses, right, in 2002 and 2010. And I learned a lot from those 2 losses. But also just look back on my legislative record, and again, the time that I was given the honor to serve the state and what we were able to accomplish in truly bipartisan ways that I think were great for the state, that I feel good about having that honor to serve in my 30s. And it really just opened up a world of other possibilities and exciting career opportunities after Congress in my 40s and closing in on my 50s.
Well, that's what I want to take away from that time period is like, what was the biggest lesson? I mean, the people you met, the places that you went, the conversations you had as a leader. What's the thing you look back at most fondly from those days in DC?
The quality of the relationships that you develop and the trust. So after my 2002 loss, I wasn't an incumbent. I didn't anticipate when I got into the primary election that I would end up running against someone who had served as governor of South Dakota and who I knew pretty well, had served over half my lifetime by that point.
Yeah, and as your story knew you as a young girl.
That's right. And, the trends in that election after 9/11, focus on national security, President Bush's trips to South Dakota in support of Senator Thune in the Senate race. All of that made it harder for women candidates, particularly younger women and first-time candidates. So, the election...
In a very red state as well.
That's right. And it became nationalized. And so, but you always have the belief all the way through election night that you can win it. And so while I was so disappointed afterward, I really just wanted to reconnect with all of these amazing people that I had met all over the state, just to thank them for supporting me the way they did in the primary election and the general election, where we made it competitive. So I did a kind of a thank you tour around South Dakota after I lost. And I remember getting to Pine Ridge, and I was in Big Bats. For any of your listeners who've been to Big Bats, kind of the gas station, truck stop, convenience store there on the corner of the main intersection. And I went in and I, started working the tables and greeting people and, thanking them. And I had a few elders who just sort of looked at me and they said, "We can't believe you're here after the election so soon, and an election you didn't even win." I mean, I think for them, I remember that interaction where I thought, I think by taking this time, spending the time and being there in person to thank them, and not there, but in other communities, it secured this sense of relationship and care and trust. And I had no idea that I would be running again as soon as I did. But it was that reservoir of goodwill and connectedness and, again, gratitude that I felt strongly I wanted to express in person that made an impression on the people that I spent time with. And then, so it was, again, the quality of those relationships. Yeah. And then after 2010, that was tough. That was a hard one. The electorate was angry. I was relatively new mom still. Zachary wasn't even 2. I felt pretty beat up by some in my own party and some, in the opposing party, which you expect. But it was a tough election and a tough loss. But there were people there who, again, were with me every step of the way, even if they didn't agree with certain votes on both parties that I would come across in those final weeks of the campaign trail, wanting me to pull it through, felt like I had, represented the state well. And even though I didn't pull it out, I remember those interactions, and that there were people who just never were going to give up. They were going to be there, they were steadfast.
That's great.
And I think it's the quality of those relationships and friendships. And I've stayed in touch with so many of those folks as I've navigated some transitions to the private sector at Raven Industries and then here to Augustana. And, you kind of remember who was with you. And you kind of remember some of the folks who were a little maybe too hard on you.
Sure.
And,
yeah.
So again, quality of relationships is what I have learned in not just the losses, but certainly the ones that I won as well. That's
a great lesson. I think leaders are often forged through fire and through the hardest, sometimes the lowest points. So you said, losing in 2010 was a tough moment. So as you step back, you have a young son. What did you learn about yourself at that time at what would probably have defined as a low moment, but you're a very ambitious person. You didn't sit around and mope too long.
Yeah, I learned to dust off my knees pretty quickly when I would have some falls, whether literal falls on the farm growing up or some of these professional blows. I really related to kind of how my dad, when I was still in high school and he lost his 1986 race for governor, and seeing him there for just a couple of months, you give so much of yourself.
Yeah.
And you put everything, not just your energy, but often, you make some decisions from a financial standpoint.
Yeah.
Of what you put in. And, so I think that I was, it helped to have a toddler in tow. You can't rest on your laurels,
no.
Right? And my husband was just so wonderful and so supportive, just encouraged me to take time, right? You don't have these transitions very often. And so don't rush into anything and just want to, be at home with Zachary more. We'll adjust the childcare situation. And I'm like so many moms, we love being moms. We maybe aren't hardwired or blessed with the same degree of patience as other moms, right? Who make a different choice, and
Sure.
are probably better in a setting day in and day out and helping in their child's development. But I was feeling pulled to take some of what I had learned in Congress and continue to help, whether that was considering finishing my dissertation, my PhD after a number of years, which Georgetown told me they might let me do, or to start my own kind of public policy consultancy practice or go in with a small firm, which I did, or go in-house with one of the constituent businesses I had represented when I was in Congress. So I did take some time, not a lot, but I did take about 4 months before committing to anything. And that was really special time with Zachary because that was hard on the campaign trail. It was hard either when he was in tow, right? And that vigilance, and it was hard when he wasn't with me.
Yeah, you missed him, yeah.
Missed him so much. So I found, the right balance and the right fit. And again, a blessing of different opportunities, and was called to join a group of people, again, that I had gotten to know and I was serving, that were also serving clients in our part of the world here in the Great Plains and in the renewable energy industry, or kind of found the right fit. And then that, of course, led to going in-house with one of the clients who was Raven Industries.
Yeah. Cool. So some time in the private sector. And I want to ask the story. So my Aunt Becky was on the search committee for Augustana University. And I want to validate this story, but she told me this story that, they worked with a consultancy to find the next president of Augustana University. And pretty late in the game, they sent an email to, I think, faculty and staff and students, current and maybe former too, saying, is there anyone you think would make a great next president? And the story I have heard is that an intern of yours at Raven Industry had submitted your name and threw your name out into the hat. Is that true?
That is true. That is true. So I remember seeing, that Rob Oliver announced his retirement, and I had gotten to know Rob and Angie quite well over the past years. And I thought, what? Seems too early for Rob to be retiring. I thought he'd done such a terrific job. He and members of his leadership team had come to Raven to meet with our CEO, Dan Rickus, and others on the leadership team to talk about partnerships. And then, we were, just busy always at Raven with different projects. And all of a sudden, I remember it was sort of the day before the November election, I get this email from a search firm saying someone has placed your name in nomination to be Augustana's next president. And I thought, that's really flattering. That's so flattering, but I don't think I could do that job.
Yeah.
So I didn't reply to the email. And then the election happened, and, there was a lot that, just working through not only the election results for me,
I'm with you.
Right? But then so much always going on at Raven. But it was my husband who asked me if I'd at least taken a look at the leadership profile that the search firm had sent. And so I did take a closer look at that around the holidays, Christmas holidays. And then, in discerning, is this once again where I think God is putting opportunities and people in front of me to discern if this is the right call to serve in a different way and in a different organization that I think so highly of. And so I decided to apply, and applied a little bit late, and didn't find out until the day of the announcement because the search firm didn't share who had nominated me, and found out that it was Thad Tietze.
Yep, I know him, yeah.
Was a terrific intern at Raven, and by that time had become a member of the Augustana campus community in our admissions office. Was thinking of going to law school. He and I had stayed connected, after his year of service, after graduation in Hungary, and then he was back at Augustana. And I love sharing that story always, but particularly with young people, because it demonstrates that, back to quality of relationships, and the fact that the time that you spend with people who maybe consider you a mentor or have opened an opportunity that you want to keep in your professional network, because maybe there'll be another opportunity. It's Thad took the time to really know me and listened well when we had lunch, when I told him, I'd always thought I'd be in higher ed, right? Yeah. When I kind of talked to him about my journey academically and professionally. And so the fact that he, again, I just am so grateful to him. But I think that goes to, when we think about mentors, we need to think about them in the reverse order too.
Yes.
Of all that we can learn from our students on campus. And I learned a lot last year from our ASA president and vice president as leaders on our campus. Others of our students who engaged in our strategic planning process with us. But really for young people to think, I might be one who facilitates a career change for someone that helped me with an early opportunity. Yeah. And to keep that top of mind, because more and more, we navigate these transitions in our professional lives. And I think it's more common for Generation X to be navigating through change as it was through baby boomers. And it's becoming increasingly likely that students, millennials, and Gen Z will navigate a lot of different professional transitions. And I think a liberal arts degree from Augustana helps us with that.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and I think it's such a good story because sometimes we as leaders, when we want something, we will literally, break down the door to get that opportunity. And sometimes there might be a door open right there that we didn't even know was for us.
John, I think that's it. And I've shared with other people, I've had some of my friends and colleagues over the years who are so focused on a particular goal, and they think that they have the clear path set out, that I think sometimes they either hit an unanticipated barrier or maybe don't see some of these other ramps because they're so focused. And then if a wrench is thrown into the plan and it becomes much harder to achieve that endpoint, I feel like there's a greater sense of disappointment.
Yeah.
And I think that if we stay focused on the opportunities we have right here and now and do well and cultivate those relationships and develop others and empower others, then we're more likely to have a multitude of opportunities we maybe didn't even anticipate. And I view the same thing for an organization, right? That if we're not inclined to take risk, or if we think it's only that place that we should be after 5 or 10 years versus, hey, let's set some aspirational high-level goals. And if we're ambitious and going after them, even if we don't achieve all of them, guess what? We may see some other opportunities we wouldn't have seen
Absolutely.
had we not aggressively pursued some of these aspirations and opened up different doors to us. So I think whether it's individually or if you're leading an organization, developing a team, it's important to be nimble and open and stay focused on what you can control and what matters most. And a lot of the rest will present itself to you as you achieve those successes.
Yeah, that's so good. And you talk about wrenches, right? I mean, every person, every organization has been thrown a wrench here in 2020. And so being willing to, to adjust and learn on the fly is critical. It's going to happen at some point in everyone's life.
John, we're modeling for our students in all of this of what we tell them we're preparing them for.
Sure.
Right? Effective collaboration, effective communication. How do we approach this unstructured problem? How do we rely on each other, right? And building community and being vulnerable with one another when the answer doesn't readily present itself. And so I think that, with logic that we apply, with the language we use with one another, the care and compassion, but constructive and tough questioning, right, to elevate the quality of the decision making, and really just, again, the ethical principles that guide us, the core values of our university, grounded in the mission of who we are, but really having to make some tough, hard decisions as we navigate through this. So often in leadership roles, you feel like you're pulled in so many different directions, right, that you can't invest the time. You don't have time. You have to make the time. No one's sitting around waiting to give you the time. But if you know that the time that you spend with certain stakeholders is going to be meaningful and important to help you as a leader, you have to make it.
That's good.
And be creative about the settings in which you do it.
Yeah, I like that. Where's an example? Where have you done?
So I have done pizza with the president in the common areas of our first year dormitories.
I like it.
I've had the ASA to my home as a thank you for helping us in our strategic planning process. We're doing some more virtual things. Clearly, we have to do virtual settings. Our new outdoor classroom, I spend with our Civitas, our honors program students, in visiting and spending time and hearing their questions in the classroom when faculty invite me to spend some time and take students' questions and listen to their perspectives.
Great. Well, I have one more, and then I have a couple of rapid fire. We'll wrap up. So I won't ask you to predict, how fall semester goes or the next 6 months, because right now everything is changing so rapidly. I'm more curious of, we talked about the Augie 2030 plan. So let's say it's 2035. And so you've gone through that plan. Maybe you've already created a new strategic vision. What does university or a college campus look like 15 years from now?
For Augustana specifically?
Or education in general. I just think there's a lot of questioning, and some people thinking, did COVID just speed some of this up, or was change was going to happen inevitably? Like, what does it look like? I actually think it would be. I want to be a university president someday. So what will that job be available 20 years from now?
Yes.
Not saying yours. I'm just saying in general.
Maybe sooner. So I'm glad to hear that too, because I really do think that colleges and universities are going to undergo some dramatic change. But yet again, I think that at Augustana and a lot of other universities like Augustana, that are, whether public or private, but let's just say private liberal arts institutions, based on a location in a growing city, are going to have some really unique opportunities here if they have the right roadmap. And the right roadmaps can be different for everybody. You've got to build on your strengths, a traditional SWOT analysis like we have done with our plan. But I agree, John, that the trends in higher education now are accelerated because of COVID-19. And I think the campus of the future, I don't see Augustana needing to enlarge our campus footprint. But we do have to modernize our learning and living spaces. Right now, our academic buildings are really in pretty good shape, right? We've got either a new building or renovated buildings. We've invested for the fall semester, in new technologies in the classrooms to connect students. But I really do think that and this comes a little bit from my past at Raven Industries and being in a technology company and the changes afoot in farming and agriculture, same in education. And we could be headed toward a pathway of precision education. Okay. And that's not this traditional, this means that the more we partner with middle schools and high schools, right? The more we partner with technical colleges and 2-year and community colleges, the more we partner to find accelerated degree programs, whether that's in the law or health professions or engineering, the more we take risks and collaborate, the more I think that our campuses change, in which they continue to be really vibrant places, but year round. I think this idea of predominantly two academic semesters, I think we will always serve this 18 to 22-year-old group that wants a residential experience. Parents want a safe campus community, right? But more and more students are going to be learning right next to each other with their earbuds in and their laptops because they have flipped classrooms, professors who are doing flipped classrooms, right? And that's already, and how professors will use technology. So whether you have students right in the classroom or your students are up on the screen, learning synchronously, knowing that they'll learn asynchronously, and then you're going to see them in person, but for these maybe different type of immersive experiences, whether that's in the lab, whether that's out in the field, whether that's with students from around the country, not just your own institution, right? So I think we need to modernize spaces and keep blending, sort of the learning environment with the living environment and the vitality of that living environment.
Which is part of why you go to a place like an Augustana, that is
right.
The community and
what's accessible to you right in the classroom and right on campus, but what a community of Sioux Falls makes accessible to you too, right? But then how do we serve people like we've been doing in our Masters of Education from China, from Michigan, from California,
very cool,
right? That may never step foot on this campus, but develop the quality of relationships because it's an Augustana quality degree program where virtually technologies help professors see who's participating and who isn't, and how we integrate those technologies in a way where we never compromise the relational for the transactional. Augustana, small private liberal arts universities are not going to become transactional places.
Yeah. Whether
we're in person together or virtual, right? It's relational. And that's where I think, okay, but how do we have the relational even when we're not always together in a more traditional 4-year residential community? And I think these hybrid programs are part of the future. And I think that more and more, especially with what COVID's doing at the K through 12, if you have more students either choosing virtual or having to go virtual because they may get exposed and they're using tech platforms and they're seeing their teachers or their cohort of peers in a virtual setting, but then they're back for an immersive experience because it's safe to be back and together for a period of time. This is starting in middle school. We're thinking this for Zachary. Right?
I was going to say, some people listening to this might think that'll never work, but your son's probably he's already doing that. It'll be so normal for him.
Exactly right. And how do we keep serving our alumni in their professional settings, like we are with our MBA program, that will be hybrid, that will be some in person and some asynchronous learning,
sure.
Right? How will we develop certification programs where you're developing a brand for Augustana that's recognized beyond what some would think is our traditional Carnegie classification, right?
Sure.
These things are really going to evolve just as the business model for higher education is evolving. And so innovation is taking place in every corner of Augustana, not just in academic structures and academic programs, not just in student life, but our back office functions, right? In terms of innovation, innovation of the business model, innovation with partnerships that can help us finance things differently, and again, take advantage of the accelerated trends that can present opportunities for Augustana, but we're going to have the assess our risk appetite,
Sure.
within the organization and with our board of trustees and partners to do some really creative things for higher education in the future.
Well, I can tell you've been chewing on that answer. It's a great answer. So it's a lot of change. So a couple of rapid fire. I don't know if you're a reader or not. What are you reading right now?
Well, I'm just finishing up the Racial Healing Handbook. That's our summer book read through our Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. We have over 80 colleagues on campus who've been doing the summer book read, led by Willette Papers. And it's by Dr. Annalise Singh. And I would recommend it to any of your listeners. It really is a wonderful framework that says, if you're white or if you're a person of color. And it helps, I think, bring down walls to facilitate really good conversations. So we read 2 chapters a week, and then we get together in an hour-long discussion section and breakout sessions over lunch. It's been great. But I love historical fiction, and I have been devouring some books of late that talk about women's experiences in war, particularly in World War II. So I finished the Alice Network, which actually is a blend of really the impact in women in World War I and the generation World War II, because of what was happening in Europe and generations of families at that time. Same with The Nightingale, which I just finished about 2 weeks ago by Kristen Hanna, and that's about sisters and their different experiences during Nazi-occupied France in World War II, but their experience, how they were treated by their father, who had served in World War I. So I love, again, that's one of my escapes is historical fiction. I've got another one sitting there, but it's about a young Italian officer during World War II. So we'll get to that.
That's great. Yeah, awesome. So a question we ask here at our company at Lemonly to prospective, people we may hire is, what's your superpower? What's the one thing you do better than everyone else?
Well, I'm going to draw from, we do Strengths Quest.
Sure.
Strengths Finder here at Augustana, and one of my top 5 is connectedness. And I think my superpower might be my ability to connect with people. And by my ability to connect with people, I think it helps me build bridges. I think I did that fairly effectively when I was a student at Georgetown, and kind of my curiosity about other people because it was a very diverse student body and community. And then even when I was serving in Congress, and I was adopted by a Lakota family in Pine Ridge. Lillian Tobacco and her family adopted me, and the name that they gave me was Tahilapiwin, which is about someone who can build bridges between white culture and Native culture. And I feel so blessed to be at a place like Augustana, which is allowing me to put that superpower to work, whether it's building bridges across faculty and administrators, right? Or with different generations of people that we work with, including our students. But then also culturally, trying to learn more, because I think I'm at a different stage in my late 40s than I was in my 20s on my own intercultural awareness and understanding. And I think that some of what God gifted me with was this ability to connect, to deepen my understanding and awareness of others' lived experiences, to help build bridges and to prepare students at Augustana to be graduates who can go out into the world and feel prepared based on expanding our intercultural sensitivities and competence.
Yeah, great. Well, I wanted to ask, because I had heard too that you're really fantastic at remembering names and faces, like when you enter a room. And so I always wonder, is that something when you show up at DC at Congress, is there like a names 101 or how? I mean, it's related to your connectedness superpower.
I think my ability to connect and want to know other people's stories, so it did help me remember names. But even if I sometimes couldn't draw the name right away, I could engage with a constituent or a voter or friend by remembering where we had last connected, right? Wow. and to pick up the conversation we had had when we had last connected. So I do feel that might have been another superpower God gave me, that, my ability to recollect names and conversations.
Visual memory, yeah.
And things about their story or their family. I feel like it's getting a little bit harder for me to do that as I've gotten a little bit, but still, I think that that matters. It matters to me when someone can recall, your son's name or how old he might be. And I think by finding those connection points, it reflects, again, a true interest and care in others. And I try so hard with our students. I really tried hard. I got a binder, because what served me well, my final point here on this topic, John, is when I got elected to Congress, I was elected in a special election, as you noted. And so I'm joining 434 other people
who already know each other.
And so when I was on the plane, I had the Facebook, right, of every member and their state. And if I would then see them on the floor or in caucus or in committee, and I could, say their name, remember their name, talk about, well, how did you go back to Oklahoma last weekend? I mean, I really think it made an impression.
Yeah.
And I was young and I had the ability to retain and to do it. And back again to the quality of the relationships, and to really want to know my colleagues, to really want to know my colleagues at Augustana, the students that we serve. And I struggle sometimes a little bit remembering the students' names, because I see them in so many different settings. But when I try hard,
Sure.
and I'm going to keep trying.
I've heard you're great at it. So, I'm a parent of 2 little girls. You have a son, Zachary. What is your piece of parenting advice you would give someone?
I talk with Zachary a lot. He's at the age where, we do let him be online, so he might see something in the news that's trending, or what he hears, because we watch our tradition, and it has always been to try to watch the news hour, the NPR news hour together, so that we can talk about the news and answer his questions. And I think, these are some tough questions he's had for us based on what he's been seeing in the news of late. But our advice has always been, you need to be respectful. You need to, even when you disagree, you need to be respectful and to stand up for people who you think are being mistreated. And you have to have courage to do that, and to kind of work through, as middle school boys now I see are doing. I hear it on the video games, right? How they're the conflict resolution in that virtual setting,
Sure.
and the conflict resolution in a middle school setting as he gets ready to start. But really to stand up for other people when you think that they're not being included and respected and treated well.
That's great. That's a really good one. Quickly, in these stressful times, how do you unplug? How do you unwind? Maybe it's your historical fiction, or what do you like to do when you need to take a break in your head?
That is one avenue. It really helps. This is the farm girl in me. I really like to be in the yard pulling weeds. Okay, it's therapeutic for me. I see visually, it gives me some degree of satisfaction, right? Both my pile of weeds as well as the aesthetic.
Yeah.
But Max, my husband, thinks that I'm too task-driven when we're at the house. And so we have decided to do more boating this summer. And I just got done telling Max and Zachary, it's one of my favorite things, to sit on the boat, watch Zachary practice driving the boat with Max, appropriate oversight. And I can just be with the 2 of them, as well as our little dog, Fenway, and be away from the house, not be task-driven, enjoy the sun, enjoy their company, and be out on the beautiful Missouri River at Oklahoma, and the beautiful bluffs. My grandpa took me fishing in Mobridge growing up, and I spent a lot of time in Pierre and love the Missouri River. And that's a great way to unplug, because then you don't have good service either out there, and then we don't even bring our devices. Well, we do bring one of the cell phones just in case.
Just in case, yeah. Well, the last question I want to ask, and you've mentioned maybe a few, but I'm a big believer that all leaders, whether we are pulled or we pushed or we step forward, that we have a lot of thanks owed to the mentors, the advisors, the leaders ahead of us. So who are some that have really inspired you to where you are today?
I would say for me, it happened generationally. As I mentioned earlier in our conversation, my grandmother, Lorna Buntrock Herseth, was my first real role model. And, in part because my aunts and my dad would tell these amazing stories about her. She was viewed as the matriarch of the Democratic Party, serving as Secretary of State at that time. But she was the first one on our family that ran for public office, not my grandfather. And my grandma was still single when she did it. She was Lorna Helene Buntrock, and she ran for superintendent of Brown County Schools in the 1930s and won 2 elections and served, and then married my grandpa, was a devoted mother and wife, served as first lady. And then when my grandpa died prematurely, she was encouraged to seek office, and she did it in a very regal, respected fashion. And, so I think that she, and a lot of people compared us in our personalities. She was the youngest of 11 kids and probably a little precocious. And then my dad served, and he had a seatmate in the state Senate when he was serving, when I was then in college. I was finishing high school, going off to college. So a different time, formative time in my life. And his seatmate was Judy Olson Duhamel from Rapid City. And Judy has been in my corner, and she amazes me to this day. I just caught up with her a week or so ago. Her energy, her commitment to her very large family, her combined family with Bill, all of their kids and grandkids, what she does for the Rapid City community, and her enduring passion in life of supporting early childhood education. And she saw something in me, and just again, she was state party chair when I was running for office. She has continued to support me and lift me up when I've needed it, and to check in on me and to love me and to really be a role model, both for working across the aisle, having these passions in life that you always give of yourself to, and really being a devoted mother and grandmother. And I do have, I have 6 grandchildren and a 7th on the way. And so, I just am in awe of her and want to be just like Judy. And
that's great.
After I was elected to Congress, I didn't know him as well growing up, but I came to know him after I was elected, and that was George McGovern. And George was just such a statesman, had endured some tough losses himself and some tragedies in his family, but just continued to be so wise and so supportive of South Dakota, of Vietnam veterans, of those causes, with the Center for He and Eleanor at Dakota Wesleyan University in Mitchell, being there for that dedication. And then not long before we lost George, I got a chance to spend time with him when he was rehabilitating from a fall. And I brought Zachary with me. Zachary was a toddler. And my stepdad and my mom joined me. And to spend time with George, as he took interest in Zachary and asked me about how I was doing, and reminiscing about just close elections that Democrats have had over the years in South Dakota. But then when my stepdad came for the last time there, who served in Vietnam, and who had the opportunity to thank George for the voice that he was, and to kind of watch to have the honor to watch their interaction, just knowing the impact that George and his courage and the voice that he was during that time in our country's history, and that he continued to give and continued to share wisdom and stories and be active and engaged, and to lend his voice in support of our politics and our system of government. Just an amazing role model, and someone who was willing to give his time to me to be a mentor as well.
Well, I love it. It's so clear, both watching you here through camera and in your voice, that how special those people are. So thanks for sharing those stories.
Of course.
And I think throughout, that was the theme, I would say, throughout this conversation, was really that value of relationships. You made that clear at the beginning. And so I love that you've pulled that thread through the whole way. So thank you so much, President Herseth Sandlin, for being here. And I enjoyed the time. And that was episode 9 with President Stephanie Herseth Sandlin. What a fantastic conversation, and thanks to Stephanie for giving up some of her time and sharing her wisdom. As always, we have new episodes of the Leadmore podcast that drop every Thursday night. You can listen everywhere where you subscribe to podcasts. Take care.